How to transform stress and resilience in difficult times. Stress, a word that makes most people tighten their chest before they even notice it. We have been trained to see it as the silent enemy of our health, the thief of our peace, the shadow that lurks behind every responsibility. But what if that view was incomplete, maybe even misleading? What if stress is not just the force that breaks us, but also the hidden fire that can forge us? Think for a moment about the times you felt most alive. Not comfortable, not at ease, but truly alive. Often, those moments came when life was pressing against you with difficulty. A challenge you weren't sure you could handle. A decision that felt impossible. A loss that left you without direction. Those moments carry stress, yes, but they also contain the raw material of resilience. The paradox is clear. The same pressure that feels unbearable can also become the key to transformation. Neuroscience tells us something fascinating here. When we face stress, our brain doesn't simply punish us with cortisol or flood us with adrenaline to create chaos. It also activates the very systems designed to make us stronger. Dopamine sharpens our focus. Endorphins dull the edge of pain. Serotonin builds stability and mood regulation. Stress, in essence, is a language, the body's way of signaling that something matters deeply. It's not the signal itself that destroys us, but our interpretation of it. This is where philosophy and psychology converge. René Descartes spoke about clarity born from doubt, about using the storm of uncertainty to cut through illusions. The Stoics, centuries before, reminded us that difficulty is not a curse, but a call to exercise our inner structure. And modern psychology, through cognitive behavioral therapy, shows us that what destabilizes us is not the event itself, but the meaning we attach to it. Stress interpreted as a threat weakens. Stress interpreted as a challenge builds resilience. So the real question is not whether stress exists. It always will. The question is, how will you stand before it? Will you treat it as an enemy to be avoided at all costs, or as a paradoxical force that can reveal strength you didn't know you had? This video is not about denying the pain or sugarcoating the chaos. It's about showing you how to use stress as an ally, how to turn moments of pressure into clarity, and how resilience is not some distant trait of heroes, but a capacity already alive within you, waiting to be awakened. Together, we will walk through this paradox step by step, unmasking stress, decoding its secret language, and discovering how to transform what feels unbearable into the very foundation of inner strength. The paradox of stress. Stress has always carried a reputation as something purely negative, a storm we must run from. Yet when we look deeper, we find a paradox. The same force that threatens to crush us can also shape us. Stress can weaken the mind if resisted blindly, but it can strengthen character if engaged consciously. This contradiction is not a flaw of human design. It is a reflection of how life operates. Every pressure we encounter has two potential paths: breakdown or breakthrough. Science reveals this paradox clearly. Short-term stress, known as eustress, activates the body in ways that sharpen awareness and prepare us to act with precision. It increases heart rate, raises alertness, and mobilizes energy reserves. But when prolonged without interpretation or purpose, stress mutates into distress, overwhelming the body with cortisol and draining the nervous system. The paradox lies not in the stress itself, but in how we relate to it. The same spark can ignite a fire that warms or a fire that destroys. Philosophy echoes this view. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the obstacle becomes the way, and Descartes showed that doubt, a form of inner tension, can serve as the starting point of true clarity. Both recognized what neuroscience now confirms. Pressure is not the enemy. It is the crucible in which resilience is forged. If we expect a life without stress, we set ourselves up for fragility. But if we learn to reinterpret stress as an unavoidable companion, we begin to unlock its transformative side. The paradox of stress is not a distant theory. You live it every day. The anxiety before a crucial conversation, the tension before making a decision, the weight of responsibility when others depend on you. These moments do not come to punish you. They come to reveal what you are capable of when pushed beyond comfort. Stress strips away illusions and exposes the raw truth of who you are. That truth can be frightening, but it can also be the beginning of growth. To see stress only as an enemy is to miss its hidden gift. To embrace its paradox is to realize that resilience is not born in peace, but in pressure. Stress is the test, and resilience is the answer we choose. The next step is to understand the hidden code inside this process, the secret language the brain speaks when crisis arrives. The brain's secret language in crisis. When stress strikes, it may feel like chaos, but beneath that chaos, the brain is speaking a very precise language. Every accelerated heartbeat, every shallow breath, every racing thought is part of a coded message designed not to destroy you, but to prepare you. The problem is that most of us never learned how to read this language, so we confuse activation with danger and pressure with catastrophe. Neuroscience shows us that during stress, the brain triggers a cascade of neurotransmitters that act like internal messengers. Cortisol is often cast as the villain, but its role is to provide energy in moments of demand. Dopamine sharpens focus and motivation, like a spotlight illuminating what must be addressed. Endorphins reduce the sensation of pain, giving you the stamina to endure. Serotonin works to stabilize mood and provide a sense of order when everything feels unstable. Each of these chemicals is a word in the brain's secret dialogue, pointing you not toward collapse, but toward adaptation. Understanding this shifts everything. If you see a racing heart as a sign of weakness, panic deepens. But if you interpret it as your body preparing for performance, resilience emerges. Andrew Huberman explains this as state-dependent performance. Your biology is not sabotaging you, it is equipping you, but only if your mind interprets the signals correctly. Stress is not simply the body attacking itself. It is the body handing you tools. Philosophically, this resembles Descartes' pursuit of clarity through doubt. Doubt, like stress, feels destabilizing, but hidden within it is the possibility of structure. The Stoics too recognize that emotions, when understood, are signals rather than enemies. Stress is the body's way of saying, pay attention, something meaningful is at stake. The crisis is not random noise, it is an urgent whisper from within. To ignore or fight these signals is to live in constant resistance. To decode them is to regain agency. Every time stress arrives, you have a choice. Treat the message as an alarm that traps you, or as a guide that shows you where resilience can grow. The brain is not sabotaging you in crisis. It is giving you instructions. The key is whether you will listen. And to listen fully, we must challenge one of the greatest illusions that keeps stress unbearable, the myth of control. Breaking the myth of control. One of the greatest sources of stress is not the event itself, but the silent demand we place on life, the demand for control. We tell ourselves that if only we could manage every variable, if only nothing unexpected happened, then peace would be possible. Yet this very obsession with control is what makes us fragile. Life refuses to submit to our scripts. The more tightly we grip, the more stress builds, because reality does not bend to human will. The Stoics understood this long before neuroscience confirmed it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we should focus only on what depends on us, letting go of the rest. In modern psychological terms, this means shifting from external control to internal regulation. We cannot dictate circumstances, but we can shape perception, response, and meaning. Cognitive behavioral therapy calls this cognitive restructuring, replacing the belief that I must control everything with the truth that I can control my interpretation and my actions. Neuroscience adds another dimension here. When we attempt to control the uncontrollable, the brain stays locked in a heightened stress cycle. Cortisol levels remain elevated, the nervous system fails to reset, and we live in chronic tension. But when the mind accepts limits and redirects focus inward, the parasympathetic nervous system begins to calm the body. Breathing slows, clarity returns, resilience strengthens. The paradox is simple. By releasing control, we regain power. René Descartes taught that clarity arises not from imposing answers, but from cutting away illusions. The illusion of control is one of the heaviest illusions to carry. Once it falls, stress transforms. No longer a reminder of failure, it becomes a guide. What can I truly act upon here? And what must I release? This shift liberates energy, which was once wasted on the impossible, and channels it toward the possible. Breaking the myth of control is not surrender. It is strategic acceptance. It is stepping into the flow of reality as it is, not as we insist it must be. And it is here, in this tension between fragility and strength, that resilience begins to grow like a muscle, not through grand victories, but through the micro-fractures of daily struggle. The resilience of micro-fractures. Resilience is often imagined as something monumental, a heroic capacity revealed only in extraordinary moments. But true resilience does not appear suddenly in times of crisis. It is built quietly, in small doses, through what I call microfractures. Just as bones become stronger after healing from tiny stress fractures, the human psyche strengthens each time it confronts manageable difficulty and learns to recover. The daily irritations, the minor setbacks, the frustrations that feel almost insignificant, these are not meaningless. They are the gymnasium of the mind. Neuroscience confirms this principle. Exposure to controlled stress, known as hormesis, teaches the nervous system to adapt. Small challenges, from a cold shower to intense focus under pressure to deliberate physical training, increase the brain's tolerance to larger stresses later. Dopamine released in these moments rewires motivation, while endorphins signal to the body that recovery is possible. Over time, these micro-adaptations accumulate into resilience. The brain literally rewires itself to interpret stress not as danger, but as opportunity. Philosophers echoed this long ago. Seneca wrote that a person who avoids discomfort remains perpetually weak, while those who accept small hardships grow unshakable. Descartes too believed that clarity is sharpened by friction, that truth is refined by error. The same principle applies to stress. Resilience is not born in the absence of fracture, but in the repeated act of healing. This is why protecting ourselves from every difficulty, insulating ourselves from all discomfort, paradoxically makes us more vulnerable. A life without microfractures leaves us brittle, but a life that embraces them with awareness creates strength that cannot be faked. Stress, in these small forms, is a teacher disguised as irritation. Every challenge survived, no matter how minor, becomes a hidden deposit in the bank of resilience. The next time you feel a surge of frustration over a small difficulty, remember, this is not meaningless noise. It is training. Each microfracture is a rehearsal for greater tests to come, and with every repair, resilience deepens. But there is another secret. Stress is not only training the body and mind, it is also holding up a mirror, revealing truths about who you are and what you fear. The mirror of stress. Stress does more than push us, it reveals us. In the heat of pressure, masks fall and the truth emerges. Stress acts like a mirror, reflecting back what we value, what we fear, and what we have been avoiding. It shows the weak points in our emotional architecture, not to humiliate us, but to guide us toward clarity. The discomfort we feel is often not about the external event, but about the internal story we tell ourselves in response. Psychology calls this projection of meaning. The same event can crush one person and empower another, not because the circumstances are different, but because the interpretation is. Stress magnifies the internal dialogue. If deep down you fear rejection, even small conflicts will feel unbearable. If your identity is tied to control, uncertainty will paralyze you. The mirror of stress doesn't lie. It exposes the hidden narratives shaping your experience. Neuroscience supports this perspective. Under stress, the brain activates the amygdala, the center of fear, but it also opens a window for the prefrontal cortex to reinterpret the experience. This is the precise moment where growth can occur. If you allow fear to dominate, stress becomes chaos. If you use reflection, stress becomes a lens, revealing what needs restructuring. Dopamine and serotonin pathways can either reinforce fear loops or support new, healthier narratives. The choice depends on awareness. Philosophy, too, saw stress as a mirror. Michel de Montaigne wrote that when we are shaken, we discover what we truly believe. Marcus Aurelius observed that adversity unmasks both character and desire. And Descartes would remind us that clarity only emerges when illusions are stripped away. Stress, then, is not punishment. It is a diagnostic tool, revealing which parts of us remain unexamined, which fears control us, and which values are authentic. If you dare to look into this mirror without resistance, stress becomes less threatening. It transforms into feedback, pointing out where resilience must be built. The reflection may be uncomfortable, but it is also liberating, because once you see clearly, you can no longer deny where change is needed. Stress shows you not just that you are under pressure, but who you are under pressure. And this is where the opportunity lies, to use stress not only as a mirror of weakness, but as a gateway to transformation. Because every moment of pressure is also a chance for the brain to rewire itself in real time, neuroplasticity in real time. Every stressful moment is not just an experience to endure, it is a live experiment of the brain's ability to change itself. This is the essence of neuroplasticity, the capacity of neural pathways to reorganize and adapt in response to challenge. Stress, when met consciously, becomes the raw material for rewiring the nervous system. Instead of leaving scars, it can leave new structures of strength. When the brain encounters stress, it floods with signals that demand adaptation. Cortisol may surge, but dopamine and noradrenaline sharpen focus, keeping us alert to new possibilities. If, in that moment, you choose to reinterpret the experience as manageable rather than catastrophic, new neural connections are formed. These micro-decisions are not abstract. They physically reshape the brain, carving pathways that make resilience more automatic in the future. Over time, stress becomes less of a shock and more of a familiar training ground. Andrew Huberman often describes stress as a plasticity window, a brief state where the brain is unusually receptive to learning. What you practice in those moments determines what becomes permanent. If you spiral into fear, the brain wires toward fragility. If you ground yourself, breathe, and choose focus, it wires toward resilience. The difference is not in the stress itself, but in the meaning assigned to it, repeated enough times to become structure. Philosophically, this is the echo of Aristotle's insight. We are what we repeatedly do. Each response under stress is a rehearsal, an act of sculpting identity. Seneca might add that adversity is the whetstone of the soul, sharpening its edge. Descartes would say that clarity comes not by escaping tension, but by using it to refine thought. Neuroplasticity in real time is the scientific language of this timeless truth. Every trial contains the seeds of transformation, if awareness is present. What this reveals is profound. Stress is not only endured, it is practiced. Each moment of difficulty is a chance to strengthen circuits of courage, focus, and calm. The more we engage with stress in this way, the more resilience ceases to be a choice and becomes second nature. Stress rewires the brain, but it is our interpretation that decides whether the wiring leads to fragility or strength. And as the brain rewires, something deeper happens. Resilience stops being a skill we practice occasionally and begins to form the very core of who we are, a resilient identity that cannot be shaken by external storms. The resilient identity. Resilience is often spoken of as if it were a tool you pick up only when needed, like a shield pulled from the wall in moments of crisis. But the truth is deeper. Resilience is not just an action, it is an identity. It is not something you borrow when life becomes difficult. It is something you become through repeated choices until strength is no longer what you do, but who you are. This transformation begins with narrative. Every time you face stress, you tell yourself a story about what it means. This is the end builds fragility. This is my training builds resilience. Over time, those stories solidify into identity. The brain's neuroplasticity ensures that repeated interpretations become the default wiring of the self. In other words, you are sculpting the architecture of your character in every stressful encounter. Modern psychology recognizes this as identity-based change. It is one thing to say, "I will try to be resilient." It is another to declare, "I am resilient." The first depends on willpower. The second redefines self-concept. When resilience becomes part of your identity, setbacks no longer feel like interruptions. They feel like the natural terrain you are built to walk upon. Philosophy gives us powerful echoes of this truth. Marcus Aurelius saw himself not merely as a man enduring hardship, but as an emperor whose duty was to embody resilience for the good of others. Descartes believed that clarity comes when one's very existence is tied to thinking. I think, therefore I am. Applied here, we could say, I endure, therefore I am resilient. Identity transforms scattered actions into a unified self. Neuroscience reinforces this with evidence. The more you repeat behaviors aligned with resilience, reframing stress, calming the breath, choosing action over avoidance, the stronger the neural circuits become. At some point, the choice no longer feels forced. It feels natural, automatic. Resilience, then, is no longer what you practice, but who you are becoming. When you reach this stage, stress loses much of its terror. It does not vanish, but it no longer defines you. Instead, you define it. The storm may rage, but you have become the kind of person who walks through storms without losing direction. This is the resilient identity, a self not shattered by pressure, but shaped by it. And once identity is established, the next challenge is to transform pressure itself into something even more powerful. Not just tension to be endured, but presence to be embodied. From pressure to presence. Pressure has a way of collapsing time. When deadlines loom, when responsibilities feel overwhelming, the mind races forward into imagined failures or backward into regrets. Stress thrives in this dislocation. But there is a hidden path that turns pressure into clarity. Presence. The act of anchoring the mind in the now transforms pressure from suffocating weight into sharpened focus. Neuroscience explains this shift through the role of attention. Under stress, the brain tends to widen its scope, scanning for threats, fueling anxiety. Yet when we narrow our focus intentionally, through vision, breath, or deliberate attention, the nervous system recalibrates. Andrew Huberman describes the spotlight of vision. By concentrating on a single point or slowing the breath with a physiological sigh, the brain signals safety, and the stress response begins to settle. Presence is not mystical, it is biological. Psychology frames this as mindfulness, but not in the passive sense of drifting into calm. It is an active discipline of attention. By returning the mind to the present moment, you rob stress of its fuel, because stress thrives on imagined futures and unresolved pasts. The present moment, however, is manageable. In the now, action is possible. In the now, clarity can emerge. Philosophers knew this long before science described it. Montaigne reflected that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily to dwell not on what might come, but on what is here and what can be done. Descartes, too, sought truth not in vague speculation, but in clear and distinct ideas, the kind that only reveal themselves when the mind stops scattering across time and focuses on what is directly before it. From pressure to presence means reclaiming stress as fuel for attention. Instead of drowning in chaos, you choose to channel it into awareness. Presence doesn't eliminate the weight of responsibility. It transforms how that weight is carried. A stone balanced in the hand feels different from a stone dragging at the neck. The weight is the same, but the position changes everything. In difficult times, presence is resilience in motion. It is the art of standing still inside the storm, not because the storm is weak, but because you have chosen to occupy the only place where strength truly exists, this moment. And when you learn to remain present, something extraordinary becomes clear. Stress itself is not an enemy, but an invisible teacher preparing you for what lies ahead. The invisible teacher. Stress rarely feels like a teacher. It feels more like a weight, a threat, or a punishment. Yet hidden inside its discomfort lies a form of instruction more powerful than books or lectures. Stress is the invisible teacher, shaping us in ways we often only recognize in hindsight. Every difficult moment carries within it a lesson about who we are, what we believe, and how we respond when life refuses to cooperate with our plans. This teacher does not speak with gentle encouragement. It speaks with tension, with restlessness, with the pounding of the heart and the tightening of the chest. It forces awareness. Stress teaches us where our patience ends, where our fears begin, and where our strength is still untested. To ignore it is to miss the class entirely. To listen is to discover that resilience is not learned in comfort, but in confrontation. Neuroscience supports this metaphor. Under stress, the brain highlights what matters most. The amygdala signals urgency, while the prefrontal cortex struggles to regain clarity. This tug-of-war is not dysfunction. It is training. Each time we regulate ourselves, redirect attention, and act with purpose, we are rehearsing for greater challenges ahead. The invisible teacher uses small moments of stress to prepare us for larger ones, often ones we cannot yet see. Philosophy frames this in strikingly similar ways. Seneca wrote that hardship is a kind of apprenticeship, teaching us lessons comfort never could. Marcus Aurelius saw trials as reminders that the universe is not hostile, but instructional. Even Descartes' radical doubt was, in essence, a form of stress, an internal discomfort that forced him to strip away false beliefs until only truth remained. What makes stress such a profound teacher is its honesty. It cannot be bribed or deceived. It shows us exactly where we stand and demands a response. Each time you feel its presence, you are standing in a classroom.
The only question is whether you will walk out unchanged, or whether you will allow the lesson to carve resilience into your identity. And when you begin to see stress as a teacher rather than an enemy, something extraordinary happens. You stop merely surviving difficulty, and you start transforming it. This is where the true alchemy begins, the process of turning pain into clarity, weakness into strength, and chaos into wisdom. The alchemy of transformation.
Every difficulty you face is more than an obstacle. It is raw material. Stress is the unrefined metal placed into the fire, and resilience is the gold that emerges when that fire is endured with awareness. This is the alchemy of transformation, the process of converting what feels unbearable into the foundation of strength, clarity, and wisdom. Neuroscience gives us the blueprint for this alchemy. Each time stress is reframed, each time presence replaces panic, the brain rewires. Cortisol subsides, dopamine redirects focus, serotonin restores stability, and endorphins remind us that recovery is possible. What began as chaos becomes coherence. The storm that threatened to destroy instead reorganizes the nervous system toward balance. This is not abstract theory. It is biological evidence that transformation is real and measurable. Philosophy gives the language for what science reveals. Marcus Aurelius believed that the obstacle is the way. The very block in your path is the path. Descartes sought clarity in the face of doubt, showing that discomfort is the starting point of truth. Montaigne reminded us that introspection born from struggle leads to wisdom. Stress, when passed through the fire of presence and interpretation, ceases to be an enemy. It becomes a philosopher's stone, a force that reshapes identity itself. The true transformation is not simply that you survive stress, but that you are no longer the same person afterward. You emerge more disciplined, more aware, more capable of meeting life on its terms. Resilience becomes less about bouncing back and more about rising forward. Not returning to who you were, but becoming who you were meant to be. In difficult times, this alchemy is not optional. It is essential. Without it, stress corrodes. With it, stress refines. Every painful moment carries a hidden invitation to be broken down by fear or to be rebuilt by clarity. The choice, though heavy, is always yours. So the next time stress arrives, remember that you are standing in the fire of transformation. It is not there to consume you, but to reshape you. The chaos is not the end. It is the beginning of a new self, forged in resilience. Stress is not the villain we once believed. It is the forge, the fire, the silent sculptor that shapes resilience in those willing to confront it with awareness. What you call chaos is, in truth, instruction. What feels like weight is, in reality, preparation. Every heartbeat racing in the storm is a reminder that you are alive, capable of becoming more than you were yesterday. The difference lies in choice. You can let stress erode you, or you can let it refine you. You can view it as punishment, or as the path.
Neuroscience shows us that your brain is always listening, always rewiring, always adapting to the meaning you attach to experience. Philosophy reminds us that adversity is not a detour, but the road itself. Together, they say the same thing. Resilience is not a skill to borrow. It is a life you build moment by moment, decision by decision.
So the next time stress knocks at your door, don't ask, "Why me?" Ask instead, "What is this preparing me for?" Because within that question lies transformation. The storm will always come, but whether it leaves you broken or stronger depends on whether you see stress as the end of the story or the beginning of your alchemy. Stress is not here to destroy you. It is here to reveal you. It strips away illusions and forces you to face what truly matters. Neuroscience shows that in those very moments of pressure, your brain is rewiring itself, deciding whether you will spiral into fear or rise into resilience. Philosophy reminds us that adversity is the truest teacher, shaping identity in ways comfort never can. Together, they point to one truth. Stress is not the end. It is the beginning of your transformation. So when the storm comes, don't ask, "Why me?" Ask, "What is this preparing me for?" Because in that question, you stop being a victim of difficulty and become the author of your own resilience. Every challenge is raw material. Every difficulty is an invitation, and every moment of stress carries within it the chance to turn pain into clarity, weakness into strength, and chaos into wisdom. If this message resonated with you, let it not end here. Share in the comments what stress has taught you about yourself. Your words may be the spark someone else needs in their darkest moment. Subscribe to this channel if you want more tools for mental clarity, resilience, and transformation, so you never face life's storms unprepared. And if this video brought you strength, pass it forward. Send it to someone who needs to remember that they are capable of more than they believe. Because resilience is not a secret reserved for a few.
It is a path open to all who choose to walk through stress with awareness. And now that you see the alchemy within it, the only question left is, will you let stress break you, or will you allow it to make you unshakable?